There's always a spontaneous wave of quiet. The
Especially
sig-
when you stare at them.
the signals when it's time to start, so it must be time to start. We're delighted this morning to have Ron Mondau. Is that pronounced correctly?
And very close.
Close? What would be closer?
Mondal.
Mondau, all right. Who, is a longstanding artist of some repute. He's got his own website, and on that you can see some impressive credentials, and I'm not going to go through them, but they include.
Put you on the camera now?
What? Right. You have to be muted. You there in the car? All right, sorry. You're muted now. That include names like the Renwick Museum, Guggenheim, I think is on there somewhere, and other museums of repute. He has been on the faculty at a number of well-recognized universities like the Washington University and St. Louis, et cetera. And Lori provided the contact for me to contact Ron, and I did, and and here we are. We did meet down here a couple of weeks ago and, introduced ourselves and talked for a little while. And I left just kind of just giggling, like. Which I would just describe it as a delightful people. So we are pleased to do that, and if I can get off the stage and let you have it now, let's do that.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I'm happy to be here today, and I'm going to talk about my career in art as it relates to abstract art, because a lot of folks have a hard time with abstraction. But I began as a child with making art when I was like 6 and 7 years old, and I can remember my grandparents' house drawing and painting. And then I had my first one-person exhibition when I was 11. It was in a gas station in Paducah, Kentucky. Yeah, and it was a friend of my grandfather's. So already I was making professional connections. But we're going to talk about art today, and we're going to talk about the difference between abstraction and realism. My preference is for abstraction. Why? Because it carries with it less bias. When you look at realism, what you're going to see is an image that will never be anything but that image. This barnyard picture of these chickens and roosters, it'll never be anything other than that. And what we typically do when we look at a work of art is we make an association to it. Our minds are like hardwired to find meaning, to find, something of meaning. And we're hardwired that way. And there's a very strong impulse to do so. So we'll take this image and we'll overlay it onto our own experiences, because we're all a bundle of prescribed responses basically built up over our lifetime. So you will look at this image and you'll say, oh yeah, I remember going to my grandparents' house and I remember that turkey or that chicken attacking me in the barnyard. And that emotion will come back. You will relive it right then and there in front of the painting. And that emotion carries with it a chemical release into your body. Every emotion you have has a corresponding chemical release that releases hormones into your bloodstream, which affects your body. For instance, if you're angry for any length of time, a few minutes or so, it'll suppress your immune system for up to 8 hours. Yeah, so it's very powerful. And this is what I believe is how we then come to a realization as I like it or I don't like it. It's the way that we feel when we look at something. That's how we determine if we like it or don't like it. Typically, we're not looking at the formality of like composition, color, and all of those formal aspects. It's really an emotional response. And that is the currency of art, is emotion, evoking an emotion. So another story about this is that when I was growing up, I was living next door to my cousin, James. And every summer, and sometimes even during the winter months, he would break a bone or two in his body. He was always walking around with a cast, sometimes on a leg and an arm at the same time. He was like always walking around like that. So whenever he looks at a painting that has bones or skeletons in it, he has a different reaction than I do because I've never broken a bone in my body. Knock on wood. Yeah. But I believe that it is the part of the conditioned responses that we have learned over our lifetime. We learn these things through family interactions, through culture, and through past life experiences that we bring with us into this lifetime. So when we're looking at an abstract image, there's this thing called fight and flight that is still very hardwired into our psyche, into our brains. It's how we operate, and it's a survival mechanism. And when we're looking at an abstract image, one thing that we'll do is try to make an association with it in the outside world. And if we like the chickens and the roosters, but if we can't do that, we turn inward. And this is my experience, and it's also a lot of other artists' experience. We turn inward to find that association or meaning. And what are we doing in there? We're likely to bump into our own divinity because that's where it resides, is inside us, right? So there's a good chance that if we're strong enough to stay with it and focused enough, that we'll bump into that divinity. So when you're looking at these things, they automatically evoke some kind of a response because the brain is so hardwired into looking at realistic images and finding, is that a tiger jumping out of the woods at me, or can I just stay here? Am I safe? And then these are just some mixed media on paper, two-dimensional. Yeah, everything that I'm going to show you is my work unless I stipulate otherwise. I am going to show you some influences on my work, other contemporary artists. But so strong is this need to make sense or make meaning or identify with the image we're looking at, that there's a technical word for it. It's pareidolia. So if you're still looking at this represent or abstract image and not going inside, your mind will actually make up an image to create meaning. Has this any of you ever experienced this?
Sure.
Faces in or other images in things, in abstract images? This is what's going on. And I would just invite you to look at some of these things as I'm scrolling through here and ask yourself, do you see an image in these? Do you see something there? It happens pretty quickly. The average person, the average audience viewer looks at a work of art for how long? How long do we look at a work of art on average? It's pretty short. How long?
5 seconds.
Yeah.
15 seconds.
He thought it was 15 seconds. He just went to the moment, so maybe he's more right.
2
Actually,
minutes, 2 minutes.
well, not quite. Actually, what they're saying is like 20 seconds, 25 seconds, which is a good amount of time, but it's not a long time. This is a carbon paper drawing. Most of the public considers abstract art as meaningless. Yet around 1905 to 1910, artists moved away from representational towards abstract, using symbolic color, symbols, signs over perceived reality, ideas over direct observation. But there was never a dismissal of meaning altogether, but a looking for a deeper, more varied level of meaning. Most pervasive among this search was the search for the spiritual, but not exclusively. And it's an interesting time because at the turn of the century, there was a revolution in the world of science that was going on, that was gaining some momentum. And that revolution was the movement from Newtonian physics as a paradigm into quantum physics as a paradigm for the reality that we see. And basically what it is an underpinning of reality supported by subatomic particles. So it's the unseen, once again, the unseen. How does abstract art gain meaning? One way that it gains meaning is by adding a title to it. Take a look at this image and think of it without the title. And then read the title and overlay that as a meaning for it. It gives it some context. So this is one way that contemporary art, abstract art gains meaning, is through the title. This is the passage over the river Styx, which is a mythic river in Greek mythology, passing over to the other side of the veil after death. And so what I've got here is a bird's eye view of this carpet or this rug or this conveyor floating above this river Styx. Wally Kandinsky was one of the foremost innovators in this movement of abstraction. Not the only one. He even wrote this book concerning the spiritual in art. This is one of his pieces. But there were other artists like Cezanne, for example, in 1905, who were searching for this deeper meaning, but not moving towards the spiritual. They were moving, in this case, towards the science side of these new discoveries. And what he was doing in southern France at the time was developing Cubism. And it was at the same time that Albert Einstein was publishing his first treatise on the special theory of relativity, whereby he described what the phenomenal world would look like if you sat on a beam of light traveling at that speed. What would the world look like? And that's exactly what Cezanne was painting. So he's looking again for some deeper meaning. The world flattens out to reveal all sides simultaneously. And they weren't pen pals either. They were not pen pals. And so each of these professional people were expressing this new idea of quantum physics, this revolution of quantum physics in their own language, the language that they knew. Mathematics for Einstein and paint for Cezanne. But then in 1986, the LA County Museum produced an exhibition and this magnum opus of a catalog around this subject of a spiritual and abstract painting. And it's a 100-year survey. And as you look through it, almost every artist that you can think of who was working abstractly is in this exhibition. So it gained quite a momentum. Some of the artists, Georgia O'Keeffe, what they were doing is describing in their language the notion of this, or the idea of this spark of divinity within themselves. Franz Kupta. I would invite you just for a minute to just close your eyes, if you would, and just go inside just for a little bit here, and let's identify the spark of divinity within us now. Try to locate it. Is it in your throat? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your left elbow? What color is it? What shape is it? What texture? Okay. Did any of you find it? Did you see it? Yeah, it's there. Become familiar with it so it's that you don't reject it when you see it and you're looking at a work of art, you can remember what you experienced. So we're going to move on now to sculpture, moving away from 2D. What's the difference between sculpture and painting? One of the big differences is that painting is an illusion. Okay, it's all done on a flat surface, depicting various qualities and dimensions of space. It's also all the information that you'll ever get from that painting, you get at once. Everything, all the information is delivered at the same time because it's all on one plane. Whereas sculpture is in the round, it's made up of material which is found in the real world. It's not an illusion, it's a real thing you can knock on. So that's one of the big differences. And it's these differences that give it its strength too. Because materials carry meaning. They carry a historical and a personal meaning as well. This particular piece is titled The Solar Flares. So it's an abstraction of our sun, complete with solar flares, complete with coronal holes, all of those things. And I created it because I was very much interested in, once again, this unseen force that is permeating our atmosphere and our bodies. That is the radiation from the sun, and it goes through several cycles. We're in the 25th solar cycle now, and it's in its peak. Other materials that I work with are glass and ceramics, and the symbol. I'm using these materials for their meaning and also their symbology. Okay, so the glass is the symbol of water. I'm very much interested in clean drinking water in America, if there is such a thing. And so this expresses the idea of clean water and a pollutant. The black dot is the pollutant, because I think that most of our water that we drink today is somewhat contaminated. So it's one of my ongoing pet projects. And then I also work with clay. And it's an interesting thing about clay. It undergoes a metamorphosis as we work with it. It starts off very soft and pliable, then it goes through the heating process, and then it returns to a stone. But it's one of the most permanent materials on the planet once it's fired. And I'm also very much involved in the image of the house as it relates to our own bodies. And this is something we'll talk about again in a minute. But it becomes like a metaphor for our own bodies. And it's our bodies that house the spirit, right? And the ancients knew this, and we know this through stories. I'm sure some of you have heard the story of the creation of humanity from clay, from molding it from the earth, and we return to the earth. So it's like a cycle, a continuous circle. And in this image, you can see the vessel or the pot that they're working on has this image of this figure on the pot itself. So there's this direct sort of relationship between this vessel and the body. That's what this is metaphorically. And this also is used in burial sites. This idea that the clay is a permanent, or the most permanent material that they have, so that they're sort of evoking this notion that the spirit is the only thing that is permanent. The body will eventually fall away, but it's the spirit. And here's an example of this idea in the contemporary art on the left. And it's this idea of decorating the surface of the body. But this is not a new concept. This is actually an ancient concept. And it's interesting, this is the work of the Mimbres Indians in the Southwest and the Four Corners area of the United States. These were ancient Indians, probably about 600 AD. But you can see here, if we look at this closely, you follow the contour of the white figure. It encompasses the vessel, so that the vessel with this abstraction is in the middle of this body. So this abstract energy or spirit is inside this body and this pot.
Is this the inside of a bowl?
This is the inside of a bowl.
Wow.
That's right. And these bowls were used as portals to allow the spirit to release into the next life. Because every one of the Mimbres Indians, you can see a hole in the middle of that. It was placed over the head of the deceased, and then they would punch a hole in it, allowing the spirit of the deceased to be released into the afterlife. And here we see a really fine example of this. These bowls are not big. They're 10 to 12 inches. Some of them are a little smaller than that. And in this one, you can see the figure is dying. Is falling over and is like dying, heading towards the earth. And what's being released is the spirit from the figure. And what is it? It's an abstracted image. once again, associating the spirit with this abstraction, this unknown, this untangible, this not of this world kind of feeling. This is another of those bowls, and then this one you can see something of their belief that this extends on into the animal kingdom as well, because this energy, this spirit is within this, what is that? Sheep, longhorn sheep. So I want to take us a little bit further now. I want to expand this idea of the vessel to include architecture, once again, a building. And in this example, you can see, this is the back of a building. This building. That's the front of it, and there's the back of it. And it's kind of amazing the way it's a corollary to a human being. We have a face and we have a back, and they're pretty different. And you can see how it kind of is bodily like. It even looks like kind of like muscles and my extra flab I've got around my belly here and that sort of thing. But on the other side of it is this beautiful, strict, very different kind of image. And then what does that house? This is the interior of the Shia Allah Falah mosque in Iran. And this is a group of a group of North African Dogon people. And this is their annual ritual of redecorating their homes, which they make out of adobe, unfired clay. It's just that, unfired clay. So it requires, even though there's not a lot of rain, it still is eroding. Once again, becoming this kind of metaphor that we take care of our bodies, we nurture them, we keep them up, we decorate them. So the surface becomes this skin-like quality. This is a big influence on my work. I studied the African art and the work of the Dogon in graduate school, and it was a big influence on me. And we continue to do this kind of decoration even on our own bodies today.
If for some reason that's not what.
So now that we've accepted that the architecture is a form of a vessel, is a form of a holder for the divine, what I want to now project or suggest is that we accept the idea that the earth is also, the landscape is also a container for this spirit. It has a spirit of its own, and we're connected to it because we are of the earth. Right? Yeah. And so big influences on my work are ancient architecture. Here is the Mayan House of the Governors, where the architecture is actually built into the landscape underground for various reasons. I'm sure it was a lot cooler. So it's built into the landscape. Chaco Canyon is the ancient Puebloan Indians in the Southwest Four Corners area. And it's built in response to this canyon, this beautiful canyon. Now, a lot of these ideas all kind of came together for me when I visited the Andes Mountains in Bolivia in like 1986. And in this image, it was very influential on me because at once architecture, it's a graveyard, and it's weathering away. So it was like this layering of these concepts, so I gained this sort of layered meaning.
Is that a log?
Excuse me?
Is it a log or is it clay or?
It's clay,
Okay.
yeah. And it's weathering away. It struck me as being most beautiful once it started weathering away. Then I had the opportunity to go to China on a couple of occasions to work there in a factory, but also to look around and see. I was able to see the terracotta warrior, thousands of these terracotta warriors from the first emperor of China, who was ironically was focused on immortality. And so his physician had him drinking and imbibing mercury.
It was.
But they felt that that would lead to his longevity. But ironically, it led to his probably his early death. But what's interesting about this is that these figures are made out of clay. And they are made of this permanent material so that they would survive the passage into the next life. And what's interesting about them, there's a lot of similarities in the body shapes of the figures, but the faces are individual and unique, every one of them. So it was though he was giving individual faces so that when they reincarnated to provide protection into the next life. The Chinese,
The dot patterns on the breastplates are also all different,
yeah, but they do
does that
repeat.
say anything?
It does, it talks about their rank. Yeah, and their regiment and their actions. They had valor or whatever, sort of like what we put on our chest today.
Would they be military or civilian figures?
Say it again?
Military or civilian figures at the clothing?
Oh, they're military clothing, yeah.
Okay.
And they used molds so that the figures the bodies are repeated throughout I mean, they found like 8,000 of them so far, and there's many more they're predicting that they still yet to uncover. So it's amazing.
Are the faces modeled by specific people? Do we?
Yes.
Yes.
You mean for specific
When they were
people?
made, were there specific models that were used for those faces?
I don't know the answer to that. Good question, but I don't know. I would guess probably, but I can't be sure. As long as they were different, I think that was be the main point.
Right.
How old are they?
This is the first emperor of China, so I'm not sure the actual date of that, but it's very early. And they've discovered his actual tomb not far, about within a quarter mile of this buried army. But they have not excavated it yet. For various reasons. They're afraid that the oxygen might deteriorate whatever artifacts they might find. Plus, it's also, they've dropped cameras into it and seen that there's pools of liquid mercury surrounding his tombs, and they're not sure how to deal with that yet. My question is, how do they get so much mercury? I have no idea. But anyway, the Chinese also believe that everything is alive. Let's see, how do I get this thing to play that? They believe that everything is alive, and so they had this reverence for stones and rock. So when I was there, this is the piece that I did to express this notion that everything is alive in nature. Everything has consciousness, even the things that we think are inanimate or dead, like a stone. So I'm there in 2012, and I'm visiting these museums, and I'm seeing once again this cycle of civilizations rising up, dynasties rising up, falling, and then being buried, and then being excavated, and then presented in museums. And this is, I mean, it's amazing. I was just taken by the number of different dynasties over the period of time. And I said to myself, gee, I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of this cycle. So what I did is I made these still lifes. And then on this campus, I buried them. I went out in the middle of the afternoons, hiding behind these trees, and I dig it up, knowing that they would be dug up. And I knew that they will be dug up in the future at some point, because we were working at an ancient kiln site. This factory is built on an ancient kiln site in Fuping, China, which is near Xi'an, just north of Xi'an, about an hour and a half. And so I knew that one day they'll dig these up. So I wanted to be a part of that cycle. So maybe one of these days when I'm reincarnated a couple of times, I'll come to a museum and I'll see that and go, familiar. Yeah, it's familiar. And then this is the famous graveyard outside of Paris. I forget the name of it, but lots of artists are buried there. From Chopin to who's the
Jim Morrison.
Van Morrison.
Yeah.
Jim Morrison.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you for that heads up. But anyway, I'm bringing this because once again, it's this architecture that is covering or holding this body. And so it's assumed that it's this vessel, and it's an interesting thing that much of the vocabulary that we could use to talk about pottery, we can talk about with architecture too, the way that it relates to the ground plane, the interior versus the exterior, the volume expressed in entrances and exits. Speaking of entrances and exits, this is a big influence on my work. This is another contemporary artist who's no longer with us. It's Gordon Motta Clark. And Gordon would take abandoned buildings and he would deconstruct them. And in this one, he just simply sliced it in half, allowing the spirit to be released. Just sort of like those membranous Indian bowls that would punch holes in there. So once again, these artists are intuiting this deeper meaning, this deeper kind of support of the phenomenal world. And then if you go inside, you will see what he's done inside is very, if you could walk in there, you'd feel like this sense of disorientation and almost like danger. It's like, oh my gosh, it's unknown, it's unfamiliar to us, which is often the case when we're looking and bumping into the spirit inside our own selves. This is the work of Andy Goldsworthy. This is a recent project that he's doing. I think it's in Ireland. I'm not quite sure, one of those northern countries, but he's done a series of these 6 houses. And in each one, you go inside and he has presented this metaphor for the spirit of the house. And tell me if you agree that this looks somewhat similar to that membranous Indian who's falling over, the spirit coming out of him. Looks a little bit like it. Another big influence on me was Smithson, Robert Smithson, a land artist. And I look at this, and the way I think about it is the earth as a body, and he's done a tattoo. He's put a tattoo on the skin or the surface of this landscape. So it sparked in me this investigation of the landscape or the art. This is a work of mine. And what I was doing is imagining cutting open the landscape and removing these big blocks, big chunks of earth, and looking inside to discern the spirit, see if I could see what the spirit of the earth looked like. It was a series of works that I did for about 15 years. What lies within? And again, this is like a 4x5 drawing, mixed media on paper. And it's a landscape, stylized landscape, but I've removed these chunks. And I'm allowing us to see inside, myself to see inside and look at the energy. And the energy is represented by color, pattern, and repetition. And then moving that into the sculptural realm, this is one of the pieces that I came up with. And this piece is about this tall. So it's a pretty good sized piece. But these represent the chunks that I removed from the earth and placed them outside in a sculptural relationship. And then while in Bolivia in the Andes Mountains, I was able to visit some of the ancient Incan sites. And I was struck by just the contrast in the geometry of the built-in structure in relationship to the soft, undulating landscape. So it's like, and it's again, this kind of stacking. It's like a body, that architecture represents a body on another body. So it's like this layering of, which sort of led me to begin to build these things myself. And this is one of the first pieces that I've built, and this is in outside of San Francisco in Redwood City. And it's made out of commercially prepared adobe block. And I'm choosing this material because I thought it would erode and begin to change shape and take on a imagery that is beyond what I made. It's almost like having children. You have children, you raise them up, and then you let them go out in the world, and they become something else, something that you didn't even imagine. So this idea of chance imagery. And I told the owner of the property, I said, now, Carl, this is going to dissolve and wash away and deteriorate. He said, oh, okay, no problem. I said, that's part of the work. That's part of it. So it was about a year later, he called me up very frantic and he said, Ron, you've got to come back and fix it. You've got to come back. It's deteriorating. And I said, well, now, wait a minute, Carl. That's what it's supposed to do. He said, yes, I understand, but it's happening so quick. So this idea of time is an interesting phenomenon that I also kind of latched onto. Question.
Didn't it go through an earthquake?
Yes, it's gone to 2 earthquakes.
It's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah.
It's still there, but it's in a different kind of shape now,
Yeah.
but it's still there. But this is when studying at the University of Illinois, my study in African art led me and my colleague David Nelson to build this first adobe piece in southern Illinois in an abandoned clay pit. And this was our vessel. This was our body. And the tattooing on the surface. And then here it is a year later,
Wow.
that same piece. And it struck me when I really revisited it, that this is the most beautiful to me. This is when it's most beautiful to me. And as I get older, I find it even more beautiful.
Looks like little houses on the top.
They do, don't they?
Yes, they look just like houses on the top.
That's interesting. You're seeing it as a landscape and these houses on top of the landscape. That's wonderful. Yeah.
I saw the first as feeling very defensive, and this is like, okay, if this doesn't happen, I'll just go with the flow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm seeing heads there in the middle that look like spirits there. Their bodies are painted on.
Yeah.
Two heads.
I see a nose and a mouth and an eye. I see that. It's right there.
Eridolia raises its head.
You put your picture right there.
You're right. And then this was one of the last pieces I did, and maybe the last piece I ever do in this series. I've been doing them for a long time. But this was done in like 2022 at Pyramid Hill, Ohio. It's a sculpture park there in what is that? Hamilton, Ohio. Yeah. And these pieces are large, as you can see. They're very big, and they involve 16 tons of earth and truckloads of earth, and we mixed it with cement to give it some stability so that it wouldn't erode immediately. It would take several years. And I've done these pieces all over the country, and I've only on like 3 occasions have I had the opportunity to let it dissolve all the way back into the earth. And complete that cycle, once again, life and its cycle. But what the wonderful thing about this is that it brings people together, because I cannot do these things by myself. So these are like community engagement projects. And what we're doing is we're applying this crude form of fresco painting on the surface of this adobe, where I'm mixing plasters and white cement and pigments together in these buckets, and then we're applying this surface to create a drawing on the surface. And then what I've done is this piece it's called Connection. So what I did is I typically invite the participants to bring something that they want to play forward in time. And we embed it literally in the walls of the piece as we're making it. So some people brought poems, and we put them in Ziploc baggies, and we embedded them. That's in the blue image up top. And then some other people there's a glass jar in the lower left that has another poem in it, and the glass jar will fall out on the ground eventually. And then we'll make a connection to whoever is wandering by at the time, looking at this thing. What is this? Or maybe they would come back in a couple of years and find it and maybe read it again and have a different reaction to it. And then there's a piece of pottery on the far right that's embedded. It's a piece of fired pottery. So again, there's this layering of these different times what's in motion time-wise, what's eroding faster and less fast. This is a piece utilizing 3 living trees, and this was in Maine, the Maine woods. So first weaving a basket out of sticks around these 3 trees, and then applying the adobe or the unfired clay to that, and then these pigments. And then this, of course, was left in the woods for a couple of years. And I went back, and this is when, again, I felt as though it was most beautiful.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and you can see how as it deteriorates and falls off, the adobe falls off or the skin falls off, it redeposits itself below. Do you see how it's remaking itself? It's almost like a shadow. So it's still alive. This is a piece that's about 22 feet tall. And this was part of an exhibition in Houston, Texas, along the Buffalo Bayou.
How did you get up that high? Did you have heavy equipment to?
And we had scaffolding.
Okay.
Yeah, we built scaffolding, put it up there. Yeah. And it literally was kind of scary.
Yeah.
Because, yeah. But this one, because of its extreme design, it was built out of wood first, covered with lath, metal lath, and then adobe was applied to it 2 or 3 inches thick over the whole thing. But it was only allowed to be up for like 6 months, and then they tore it down. Right. Now, I've experimented with doing these indoors. This was the first one I did at the Chicago Library down on Michigan Avenue. It's on the 3rd floor there. They have an exhibition space. And so it's about 1.5 tons of dirt. But where do you get that in Chicago? I mean, where do you go to get it in Chicago? Well, it just so happened that in the Pilsen area of Chicago, there was a church that had burned down. So we went there and we dug and put it into our pickup trucks, and we drove up there, and then we got wheelbarrows and we put it in the elevator, and we went up to the 3rd floor and we took it out and we used it. And we're applying this plaster to it, and we discovered that there were pieces of like shoes, pieces of photographs, jewelry, all kinds of things embedded in this dirt, which became a part of the surface of the piece, that became a part of the meaning of the piece, if you will. They gave it a destination as well as meaning. So it's again this sort of layering. Yes.
The front of the steps, is that just a darker, is that are those shadows from the light in the room or? Is
Yes. Yes.
it- Okay,
So it is.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Right. Very good observation.
The narrowing of the steps seems to create a perspective illusion.
It does, doesn't it?
And, I'm sitting here trying to wonder, is it the angle or is it the
Yeah.
steps?
And what's interesting about what you're saying in your question is that you're looking at an abstracted image, and yet you're forcing
Right.
an image that, or an idea about the way that realism works. So you're like in this tug of war between interior, exterior, abstraction and real representation, which I think is where we all function quite often.
Mhm.
that's beautiful.
And this is called Tiaku. And I've named these pieces sort of just sounds. So I want to keep the titles very abstract as well. And this is about 12 feet tall and 24 feet long and 16 foot deep. And I want to acknowledge my wife, Lynn, who helped me.
I helped with that. 7 weeks.
7 weeks, a grueling summer heat of upstate New York. Yeah, and I figured that any woman who can handle that has got to be my wife.
It looked like a cathedral at first.
Does
It
it?
looked like a cathedral with a round door that you could go in.
Yes, yeah, I think you're right.
Yes, it looked like
Yeah.
a cathedral.
How did you mix the colors? The colors from the earth are different in different parts of the country.
The coloration is achieved via pigments, like powdered pigments, like they glean from the earth, but they use them to color concretes and tile, grout. So that's what I'm.
Glory of the color, that's just glory shine. You're amazing, both of you. This is really touching to your heart.
Well, it was touching to my back too.
Your back really hurt.
I mean, we estimated that this was like 27 tons of clay. I mean, think about mixing that.
Wow.
That was a lot of fun painting that though.
Mm.
We had big buckets of the color. It was white cement and pigment.
That's right.
And we slathered on and then we chisel back through and then we had the garden hose there. We could wet it.
Scratch back through it. So it's
Yeah,
You were playing.
we were playing. We were playing.
fine.
Yeah.
It's like
She's playing in the mud, still playing, making mud pies. Now, occasionally I will use this work for a political statement. And this is a piece that is a body, it's a vessel, so it's a body as well, and the body is kind of collapsing. And this was an exhibition at the Northern Clay Center in Minnesota. And this was this was a year, or maybe it was the second year of the first Iraq War. And this was to talk about the number of soldiers who had died. And so what I did is I kept this piece wet. I kept it under wraps and wet until the day of the opening, then we unwrapped it. So, because I wanted it to remain wet, because wet clay, the surface is most like skin. And also, you have to view it by going up and looking in these holes that I have on the side of it. So you had to lean in and get close to it and touch it almost to actually see what's inside. So you would smell it. You would smell that wet clay as well as, so I'm trying to reference the origins of the materials and give them their meaning, let them say. And then this was what was inside. So that all of that decoration you saw in the other one on the outside was turned inside. And they're basically just tick marks of soldiers who died in that conflict. This was a piece at the St. Louis Art Museum called The Giving Tree. Some of you may remember that title from Silverstein's childhood book. Beautiful little book and a wonderful story. But what I did is I identified this Bradford pear tree and then built these adobe walls around it, using them as a sort of like a design generator. They're following the limbs of the tree. And then this is a piece that I did several years ago here in Jackson, Tennessee, at the University of Tennessee at Jackson. And working with a number of students over a week-long period, we produced this piece. That's the back of it. So once again, trying to keep this idea of interior versus exterior and bodily.
Does that triangular piece, does that hold when it rains or something, does it?
No, it actually has capped over with clay.
Oh, okay, I was just curious.
But what happened was, it was up for about 6 months and then a tornado came through
Oh, wow.
and it just tore the heck out of it. Yeah, but what it allows you to see is see the glass bottles out in front, the green bottles. One of the things that we did as a group, we decided we were going to leave messages for the future, our hopes and our dreams about the future. And so the students collected bottles from the campus that were out on the ground and in trash cans and stuff. We washed them all, dried them, and we wrote notes to the future. And we put them in there, and we put them inside the piece, inside that cone, hoping that it would be many years maybe before it was exposed, but it didn't take quite that long. And then I'm gonna go quickly or more fast through some of these. These are at the East Hampton Center for Contemporary Art in New York. 3 small pieces that are actually reflected into the ground. That is, we dug out steps and cone shapes into the ground below these pieces. This is a piece that was done at a small school there in St. Louis, and it's oriented to the 4 cardinal directions. Because I'm not sure if many of you know that St. Louis was the sort of epicenter for the Cahokia mounds, the mound builders of ancient Middle America. And it was actually called Mound City. And so this piece is sort of an homage to the mound builders of Mid-America. This was a piece done at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I'm not Chapel Hill, Asheville. Working again there with the students. It's about 40 feet in diameter. And this is about a year or so after it's done. This is a piece that I did in Brownsville, Texas in like, I think it was 2016 or 17. I'm not sure exactly which date. And it was done on the site of the museum there in Brownsville, Texas, which is right across from Matamoros, Mexico. And it's called the Portal of Hope. And it was built in conjunction with a community of multiracial folks. And we invited via the radio, we made radio announcements, we put out into posters on the street, and we had people come up and join in making this piece with us. It was only up for like 6 months and then they took it down. This is another, speaking of, once again, I mentioned that I'm interested in time and the passage of time in this cycle. So I've collected rocks from a creek in front of our house for many years, and I use them to express one of the fascinating things that I think is going on in the world of science, and that is the particle accelerator in CERN, Switzerland, the Large Hadron Particle Collider, which is their stated goal is to find the beginnings of the universe. So they're going backwards in time by smashing particles together at near light speed. And to get an idea of this, take a look at this man in the foreground. Do you see him down there?
Oh, wait.
I mean, this thing is huge. This was something that was started back at the turn of the century. 1954, they started building this Hadron Collider. So one of the things that they have found is that the reality that we're living in right now, we're all surrounded by multiple dimensions, other realities that are existing simultaneously in the space that we occupy. So I thought, wow, this is an interesting idea. I wonder how I could express this. So what I did was identify drawings, 3 different drawings and identify them as different realities, okay? And then I brought them together on one picture plane so that they're one reality. So these 3 images existing on one picture plane. And it changes as you move by it. So as you move, the image changes. But it's the 3 realities sandwiched onto the one now moment, because that's all there is, right? It's just the now. And that's my expression of that, and I continue to do so. And then I want to leave you with this book, and just suggest that if you're interested in thinking about the spirit and the divinity, this is a book that has recently come out by Greg Braden, and it's a fantastic treatise on the power of our divinity, and it's the fact that it's under attack today. Some of you may have heard of the term transhumanism, and that is the effort by institutions on the planet to trade or supplant your biology, your divinity, with computer technology, like chips in the brain, chips in your bloodstream, all of these things that will diminish and have ripple effects on how you emote, your feelings of emotion, as well as your sense of divinity. So I would invite you to look at this book if you're interested. And then that's it. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
I have a question about the process.
Mhm.
And how much intentionality is involved, like I was really taken with that piece that you showed of the stones that you had collected. And I'm wondering, did the image of the completed project exist in your mind before you started, or did it come into being along in the process? process, and what does that feel like if that's the case?
It all depends on excitement. It starts by, what are you excited about when you get up in the morning? And I was excited about going to the creek and collecting these little stones that all look about the same. They're like little cigar shapes, soft, elongated egg-shaped rocks from the erosion. So that was my impetus. I had no idea what I was gonna do with them at the time. I was just like, wow, I just love these. Lynn, you can probably remember me bringing up buckets of these things. And it was spreading them out, letting them dry, and then mixing up epoxy and gluing a nail. It's all a very meditative and tedious process.
Yeah.
But in that meditation, you begin to realize, hey, these are like particles, and this is the way that I could arrange them. The hardest part about it was convincing the museum to let me drill 5,280 holes.
How big was that?
So that was like 11 by 12 by 14 feet. So it was pretty good sized piece. Yeah, pretty large, about the size of that. Yeah, so it came into being kind of slowly incrementally. But after I did that first one, I did several renditions of that.
Yeah.
I've done probably 4 or 5 renditions of that over the time.
You must be incredibly patient.
I don't know, Lynn, am I in pet grade? Yeah. It doesn't feel like I'm patient at all.
Your mind is going everywhere, but you have to be patient, persistent to do that. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, you have to hold the excitement for it for a period of time.
7 weeks at least.
Yeah,
Have you ever calculated how many tons of earth you've moved?
I'm sorry.
Have you ever calculated how many tons of earth you have moved? The actual weight of everything that you've handled, that's a lot of clay.
That's a lot of clay.
Yeah.
It goes back into the clay.
That's right.
You're not,
It's a cycle and it goes back into the earth.
you're not.
Yeah, and I love that, how your concepts change, your pieces change.
Yeah.
Because they change outside or, they break down into something.
Right.
Else.
Some of you may have heard of the sort of movement in contemporary art called chance imagery. It was really put forward by who was the artist in music who played the silence on the
John Cage.
Oh.
John Cage, thank you. Yeah, so what he would do is he would take blank sheets of music paper and stand back here and throw pepper at it.
No.
And then he would play wherever the pepper landed, he would play it on the piano. His most famous piece is called Silence. So the audience is assembled at 7:30 on Saturday night for the concert. He walks out on stage, sits down at the piano, and for 21 minutes just sits there. Gets up and leaves.
And that's the audience make the music.
Yeah, the audience and the birds. Raccoons over there.
How did we get so lucky to meet you?
Lori, you're. Lori saw me give this talk at the Fishman Gallery.
We're talking, it was different though,
Was it?
but yeah, but it was always
Come back and
different.
show us another one.
And Lynn's been my friend for what, 3 years now. You know, we met at the gym in Johnson City.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I have several other lectures if you're interested.
Oh, yes.
We're also sitting in a building that will disintegrate over time and return to the earth.
That's right. That's right. And it's made out of clay.
It's happening faster than you realize.
Building it brown.
We try our best to patch it up, don't we?
Have you or heard them say out at the fossil site that they built the building that houses the museum on top of fossils? Because they know they can't get to all the fossils before that building disintegrates.
Wow.
So they're, that's the kind of time it's just not time my brain works with.
Right.
So it's on top of more fossils, but they've got so many to get.
Right.
It'll be time to tear it down when they're ready for those.
That's an interesting notion, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a totally different way of thinking about time.
And the way they found them. I mean, they were building a road through there, weren't they?
They were knocking down a hill.
Yeah.
Where is this?
Right.
Yeah.
It's amazing, all these
It's on
huge
the-
fossils they found.
Yeah, you'd like it.
Instead of going right to grave, it's like. It's not there.
Was that right next door
to the high school?
They're mammalian fossils, not dinosaurs.
Right, they're probably 4 million years old.
And reptile.
Wow, wow. I've not seen that yet.
Yeah, they found a red panda that had only been found in China.
A mastodon on his head.
They found
Falling into a swamp.
a sloth that was pregnant. So the fossil, they reconstructed the fossil, so they have the sloth, but then also the developing fetus in utero. I remember seeing that, so I don't know if it's on display, but I remember walking around, they have a lower level with the displays and an upper level with the working area. Because it's a working site, and on one of the display tables up there was this laid out fossil sloth with the interior sloth base.
Wow,
Fascinating.
it is, it is.
Yeah.
So much we don't know.
And it's interactive for children, they can go there and play in the dirt, and they'll have, you know, things there that they can see and do, so it's really good.
Yeah, that's another one of my interest in terms of time is how they're constantly finding new sites and digging up these archaeological sites that keep pushing back humanity's footprint on the planet.
Have you ever thought about working with meteorites? It'll take you back 4 billion years.
Wow, I think they would be hard to come by.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a market now. But the small ones are affordable, but unfortunately, the big ones are very expensive.
I mean, I'm intrigued by them. I've never thought about actually working with them.
I mean, it's the rock that's as old as the earth.
Yeah. True.
Potentially older.
Ron, you're talking to a physicist.
Oh, okay. That's why you were shaking your head at some of those.
Just kidding.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We did record this to the cloud and it'll be available in somewhere close to our website. I'll figure out what to do it, so if you missed some of it, go back and watch it. Well, thank you so much.